This August, we have an opportunity to really have an energetic reset in our lives and start moving in such a new and different direction. And the best part about all of this is that this is not going to require you to do a massive overhaul of your life right now, only to continue doing all of the things that are helping you get on your right path. But the thing here is, that the things that you may be doing right now to get on your path may not be logical. They may not make sense, but they are moving you towards a new paradigm, a new way of living your life. And that is from the heart. And the heart does not make sense because the heart reminds us that we are humans, that we are actually here to embrace the aspects of ourselves that are imperfect and not just logical, not just presentable, but raw, real, authentic, and deeply flawed. Right now, we are being shown the limits of logic. It's not going to be enough to just figure your life out by having A, B, C, and D done because you've tried that way and it's not working. And there's something, a deeper calling within you to listen to your heart. So let's talk about this and how it's showing up with this solar eclipse that we're having on August 12th. This is a total solar eclipse. A total solar eclipse is very, very powerful. This means that the moon is completely blocking the sun's light from reaching the earth for a moment. And I want to talk about before we even get into what Leo is and what's going on and all of the themes. I want to talk about what this means from the perspective of our psyche. So understanding that our psyche and the luminaries are very, very intertwined. So the sun and the moon, the sun representing our conscious sense of self, our identity, our ego, and the moon representing our unconscious and the shadow aspect of the self. The parts that are not always illuminated to us, just as the moon is not always illuminated to us. Now, during any new moon, during any solar eclipse, we have a darkening of the moon as well. So it's not that our unconscious self necessarily is being illuminated, but that our conscious way of relating to ourselves is being eclipsed for a moment. Meaning, we have an opportunity to release old attachments of who we believe ourselves to be, who we believe we should be in order to allow something new to come in. Now, from a modern perspective, we see eclipses as a way of moving toward our evolutionary path because an eclipse means in astrology that we've got the nodes here, right? The nodes of fate, the nodes of evolution. From a more ancient perspective, this was a time that was feared, are times of karma and fate and destiny. And so they're very volatile and we don't have much control, right? And how much control do we really have anyway in life, right? So there are different ways of looking at this, but the way that I'm feeling this eclipse and really all eclipses is that it invites us to take a more hands-off approach to it as a reminder that much of our lives requires a hands-off approach as well. So it's not something to be feared, but knowing that there is something that is pulling us that may not be completely clear yet, because there's not a lot of illumination during solar eclipses. So it's not about waiting for something to click, but rather allowing ourselves to walk towards something in the dark that we feel is correct for us and letting ourselves be drawn and pulled towards something rather than consciously directing our will, which is the sun. Okay. So this is the lens that I'm viewing this solar eclipse from, is that it's not about me making something of it. It's not about me also just saying, I don't give a crap, but about doing the things day to day that I know are effective or are, I believe, are leading me toward a new way of being that feels more congruent to my heart. I talked recently in, I think it was my New Moon in Cancer video about chitta, this heart mind in Buddhism, and how in Buddhism, they are intertwined, and we do, at least in Theravada Buddhism, I'll just speak on that. We do even different types of meditations to further unite the mind and the heart. One of them being loving kindness, metta, right? Loving kindness meditations that where we think really loving thoughts in order to train our mind to over time start really thinking in that way, right? Because the mind is ruled by the element of air, so it can be directed at certain times. There are aspects of it we cannot really direct, and there are times that we can really direct it. This is the whole thing of neuroscience, right? That we get to create new neural pathways. So let's talk about this from the perspective of what it means to live a life from the heart rather than the head. Most of us are conditioned in our day to day to live from the mind because the mind gives us a much better illusion of control. It gives us these standards that society says, okay, you got to go to school, you got to hit these markers. We want you like married by 30, hopefully some kids, this much in your retirement, this much in your, and it has given us these kind of rules to live by to help us get there. And we can see through a lot of shifts that are happening in astrology and human design that this is something that is breaking down right now. Systems, structures, we're seeing the weakness in all of them. And we are being tasked with building a new world, per se. And this is a world that will lead with the heart. In human design, this is happening in gate 4, which is a gate of formalization, which is really interesting. We're going to talk about this a little bit later and how that can come into play as we are moving toward living a life with heart and seeing the limits of logic and what logic has told us is possible, right? When we don't make peace with the past, when we don't feel safe in the present, the future doesn't feel hopeful. It feels hopeless. But when we can make peace with ourselves, there is nothing but pure possibility and potential for what the future holds. And future is a huge part of this eclipse as well, because we've got the North Node in Aquarius, which is very future oriented. It's about holding a vision. It's about humanity. It's about free thinking, being able to have the ability to make up our own minds and have our own opinions and find communities that align with that. So, without further ado, let's take a look at this chart for the solar eclipse on August 12th at 20 degrees of Leo. Now, as I'm pulling this up, I just want to say that if you have anything around 20 degrees of Leo, so really like 15 to 25 degrees of Leo, or Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, this is going to be impacting you quite directly. So I have my ascendant at 21 degrees of Leo. Yeah, this will be interesting. So we've got the chart here. Let's look at the astrology first. Okay. Wow. That's a lot of Leo we got there. Oh, I love talking about Leo. I love talking about every archetype, but I'm trying to think like, where do I start with Leo? Leo is self-expression. Leo is the performer. Leo is about this sense of our inner child coming through and really leading with this generosity, this heart. When we have so many planets here, Mercury, Jupiter, Sun, Moon, the South Node is really what makes this interesting to me because, and I've talked about this at length, I have a lot of videos in the past month talking about Jupiter in Leo, opposing Pluto, the nodes in Aquarius and Leo. I have Substacks talking about it as well. But I've been saying that this Jupiter in Leo transit until next year is going to be very much flavored by the South Node here. So we think of Jupiter and Leo like, oh my God, time to shine bright and be big. I've been looking at the South Node and saying it's not quite that easy though, because even though Leo is a performer, like Leo performs for an audience, there is an aspect of you that has been playing a part for too long. And the sun here being eclipsed is really giving you an opportunity to allow yourself to become different at this point in your life, to release the need for external validation. Because oftentimes what happens is that we become who, especially when we're talking about Leo, we become who and what is externally validated to us. Leo cares deeply about how it is perceived and if their audience is enjoying their show. So it can, on the shadow end, start living a life in which it is actually just looking and seeking constant external validation. And the invitation here with the North Node in Aquarius is for more freedom, more detachment, less focusing just on what actually gets you externally validated, what gets the applause going for you, and more so on what you need to feel truly free. On the difficult or shadow side of Aquarius, Aquarius is just can be too detached. It can focus too much emphasis on the mental realm of ideas and seeking knowledge, right? It can put a lot of emphasis there and want to disseminate information, disseminate knowledge to the world, which is beautiful. But sometimes it does so at the expense of being human and connecting, right? It can be very cerebral. And Leo reminds us, hey, like, this is what is this really all about, right? You want to connect with people, and connection can happen through ideas, absolutely, but also it happens when another person sees you as a person. This is where I think authenticity comes in a lot with Leo. A lot of people talk about authenticity. And I think that the South Node in Leo is going to be stripping and purifying any aspect of the self that has been not authentic to you. And you may have not even known that. That's the thing, is that you may have thought this was your authentic self. And how do we move into actual embodiment of our authentic self-expression in the moment? This is something that's going to be coming up a lot here. I'm just like looking at all this stuff in Leo. This is a very self-expressive time. One of the things that I like to think about when I'm looking at the charts here is that Leo rules in human design, the Leo gates. There are 5 Leo gates. 3 of them are in the throat center, 1 is in the ajna, and 1 is in the G center. So the one that's coming up during this time is going to actually be the one in the ajna. So this is why we're seeing the limits of logic. But the fact that we have 3 gates in the throat center tells us that this is a lot about self-expression, right? The throat center is where we communicate, where we express. It's not always about words, but it's a place that we express ourselves. So once again, this is a time where a lot of us want to be not just knowing our truth, but proclaiming it, exclaiming it, expressing it, putting it out in the world. Leo is very, very creative. So the ruler of this is the sun, and the sun is in Leo. So the fact that the ruler is the sun and it's in its own sign, in a sign that it really enjoys being in, Leo, and it's being eclipsed. I Let me just transmit it to you mentally right now, because it's hard to do it in words, like how big of an opportunity this is for us to really allow an old way of identifying to fall away. Because from the psychic standpoint, I talk more about this in Mapping the Shadow, but from the psychic standpoint, it's the ego is where we actually identify. So it's not necessarily what other people think of us, but who you believe yourself to be. So this is why it feels like an internal process, but that internal process is going to lead to, because this is not a one-time event. This is a multi-year event while we've got the eclipses on this axis, but specifically at least for the next 6 months to a year where this is going to be unfolding. So because it's a dark moon, it might feel a quiet knowing at first, and then as the moon starts waxing, we start moving towards the lunar eclipse in at the end of August. We're going to be discovering more and more about what happened during the solar eclipse. I also note that solar eclipses tend to have more of an effect globally. I find that lunar eclipses feel very personal. So, like there might be a lot of important things happening around the solar eclipse, proclamations, Leo and the sun. It's really about nobility and kinghood. So there may be a lot of that kind of energy, people trying to step into the throne, per se. And the invitation for you is to step into your throne by releasing what you believe that needs to mean, what you've been conditioned to believe it needs to mean for you to feel kingly or queenly. So this is a south node solar eclipse, which means that this is really about releasing. There's so many beautiful supportive elements to this lunation. We've got this kite here in air and fire. We've got another kite here. Kites are beautiful aspects, beautiful patterns that we see in the chart that are being held together by an opposition. That's the point of tension. So here we've got the opposition with Venus in Libra and Neptune in Aries, bringing in this idea of how do we maintain a fluid sense of self when we're relating to the other? Because we want an ego that is healthy and robust, but adaptable. And so Neptune in Aries is really bringing in this idea of the self going through this dissolution and becoming more adaptable and open, but not losing itself in the face of creating harmony with another. Then we've got this other opposition happening here, which is, as you can also see, creating this mystical rectangle. Who's got one of those in their chart? I do. But this other opposition here is Mercury, but both of them are separating from this opposition to Pluto. And we've talked about this at length about Jupiter Pluto opposition here and the self versus what society believes you need to become, or how you want to express yourself versus what you believe would be the most helpful to communities and being of service, and allowing yourself to become a person and not just an idea is also huge. What does it mean? Like, where am I not connecting as a true being? And I think to me, that's what authenticity really reminds us about, is like, this is what I'm just noticing a lot of authenticity. That word just feels like it's been hijacked along with embodied, where it's just becoming a show and performance in a way that feels fake. Because the thing about, as a Leo person, I'll just say this, I do care that you enjoy watching a video. That matters to me. I'm not just here like, I'm just gonna be me and I don't care. I'm gonna pick my nose. I'm gonna do all these things. Yes, there is this feeling of I want to be me. I want to be comfortable and I want to just act like myself. And also noticing that I'm not sitting here by myself. I mean, I am, but you're watching this. And there's something happening between the two of us, right? And so I do care. But yeah, I have another video I just created where I talk about this a little bit more. So I'll refrain from going deeper into this. Leo does care about the other person. That's the whole point. It's ruled by the heart. It does care about the other person deeply. And yet, at some point, their their desire to come off as authentic can become fake. It can become a performance. Like, I'm so authentic. Look at me. And I think that as a collective, we are starting to feel that difference. We're starting to see and be more discerning about authenticity. And we may not know it logically, but we are getting better at trusting ourselves. And this is why I really like working with somatics, and as well as working with human design, because human design gives us an authority that can guide us on our path of understanding how we're really here to make decisions in our lives, and how we can move away from the conditioned self, the not self, into a more authentic self. And it's actually why I'm using human design, the profile and the types in my upcoming class, Safe Scene Sovereign, which is going to be August 15th to 16th. I'll have it linked down below, where we're going to be talking about a lot of these things, about the relationships between you and the people that you want to offer things to, because I really do think that this axis, this South Node, North Node axis in Leo and Aquarius is going to be inviting a lot more people to start sharing their gifts because of the possibilities of this North Node in Aquarius, bringing in a lot of questions and uncertainties around AI and what it means to be human. I think that a lot of people are going to be struggling if they're trying to do things the old way. So this is not just for like influencers, but anyone who wants or like who wants to become content creators, although I will be talking about that because it's part of what I do, but anyone who wants to share their gifts with the world, share their ideas with the world, their services, their offerings in a way that doesn't require them to abandon themselves. And we're also going to be talking about money because that's a huge part of it too. I just did a video on Chiron and Taurus, because that's going to be bringing up a lot of money wounds too around receiving and holding money because I want spiritual people to have money. I do. Uh, these are themes that we're going to all be facing. But if you want to offer anything to the world, it's going to require a whole new approach. The old systems just will not work anymore because this world is changing and it is changing rapidly. And I think we can all feel it. I think we can all feel it. So, let's stay we stay grounded here. Okay. We try our best. Right. And that's just a reminder actually as I say that for you to just take a breath and just kind of settle into where you are. Okay, let's continue. And I just realized that my mic wasn't plugged in this entire time. I love that. Okay, so maybe you'll hear a difference in the audio here. Okay, so I just want to point out that Mars is out of bounds and is fallen. I have an old video on Mars and Cancer where I go deeper into this archetype because I really actually like Mars and Cancer. I tend to like fallen planets. I do, okay? I think that there is so much potential for available there. Um, I get kind of bored with really easy if there's like too many easy things, it's kind of boring, right? So Mars being out of bounds essentially means that it is not listening to the sun. It is not listening to the king. And the king rules and it gives the rules of society, right? So this is allowing us the freedom to start moving in a different way, but it's in Cancer. So I think one of the biggest things about Mars in Cancer is that it evokes this like Capricorn Cancer archetype of Cancer being like, I'll do it when I feel like it. And Capricorn being like, okay, but sometimes you just have to do things that you don't feel like doing because that's life and like that's responsibility. But Mars being out of bounds here can make Mars more erratic. There can be a augmentation of the negative and positive aspects of Mars. So more courage, more independence, more assertiveness, and also more aggression, more anger, uh, things heating up in terms of, in mundane astrology, Mars is about war. And so, yeah, we'll just see what is happening in the world here um around this time. I really don't watch a lot of news and it's a lot of people because I am Iranian will bring up Iran and I really appreciate it. Nowadays it's the first thing that I get now when I tell people I'm from Iran. Um and it's just a very volatile time in the world and there is a lot on everybody's plates and a lot on everybody's nervous system and pressure to act and to do things. And so, again, this is really talking about your individual contribution. Because as much as we probably all want to save the world, there's a part of me for much of my youth that really felt like I had to. It was my responsibility. We can't. We can't save the world. And this is reminding us that we can do something, though and that is to become more whole and our wholeness contributes to the wholeness of society. That is really an invitation right now for all of us is like where is your individual contribution going to be something that you uniquely can offer, and then how do you remove the blocks of you actually offering that. So once again, this kite is really giving a lot of support. Is there tension? Absolutely. We see that in these oppositions. But also there are ways that we can integrate that tension, right? Venus in Libra is really, really important to watch too, because Venus is moving very slowly and it's going to go retrograde in Scorpio and going to go back into Libra. So there's something around like how, and because of this sextile with Jupiter and Mercury, Pluto, when Mercury is opposing Pluto, I have this natally, not in these signs, but I have it in my chart. This is a very tense mind, very obsessive, very good at solving things, very good at solving things, and also very tense. And so the way out here can be like communicating, sharing your thoughts in a way that isn't about being right. Mercury Pluto oppositions, all it's very much like, I am right, because the mind seeks to dominate and control through the other person because it's opposition. So watch this sort of like indignation around this time of feeling of like, I need to be right here. This is very much the ego. This is very, very much the ego trying to maintain its control position through defense mechanisms. And that is where we can see where our ego has not been adaptable, has not learned to be adaptable yet. It's very defensive. But we can see by sharing our thoughts, sharing our difficulty with our thoughts, right? Being vulnerable that, yeah, I'm really struggling because I want to be right. And and you're fighting it and it just feels like really crappy, and being very honest about that process, because the other sextile that we have here is to Uranus with Mercury here. So it's going to require us to evolve in our ways of communication and thinking in order to have have more healthy relationships in our lives and a more healthy sense of self, right? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the human design. Mm, got the Judgment. So when the Judgment comes up, this is a major arcana. You are being called to a major contribution, to a bigger purpose. There is something that is happening that is requiring you to step up. And I don't like using words like timelines and things, but it really does feel like I talked about this in the full moon in Aquarius, but I do think it's still very prevalent that since the full moon in Aquarius up until this solar eclipse, you have been having to make a lot of boundaries in your life, saying no to things, saying yes to things, raising your standards, right? This is nobility after all. This is really going to require you to maintain certain positions without losing a sense of like grace. Yeah, but not allowing that to undermine your worth and what you want and your needs. Oh, I love talking about boundaries. I have a video on boundaries if you haven't watched it yet, because it's really it's such a cool and interesting topic to go deeper into. Now, when we go into the human design, we see that this is happening in gate 4. Gate 4 is about formalization. It's where we seek to answer certain things in order to create patterns. Now, one of the things that gate 4 hates is a pattern being broken, because that makes it seem as though chaos is almost certain, right? Because when we have a certain pattern of our lives, of who we believe we have to be and what we have to do, that creates predictability. And the mind and the nervous system really like predictable and familiar things. So when that is broken, or when there is even a threat to that pattern being broken, this becomes very difficult. And this is a very mental energy as well. Once again, this area of our lives is being eclipsed. So there is an ability to allow ourselves to let these old patterns to break so that we can step into a new sense of our purpose. Some sort of like the Judgment is a calling that we have. It's getting so loud that you can't keep ignoring it. There is a limit that has been reached that like you can't keep denying this aspect of yourself. The shadow here in the gene key goes from intolerance to understanding. And of course, I want to read from Richard Rudd in his book, The Gene Keys. It's in my book list as well. He says the fourth shadow is essentially a misuse of one of the great gifts of the human mind, logic. The power of this fourth gene key is the power to read and solve logical patterns. This ability leads you to a universal understanding of the rhythmic patterns and tendencies of all life. This is when we're moving with the gift, okay? But at the low frequency with the shadow, he says that it is based on emotional reaction or overreaction. This shadow uses the power of distorted logic to support and uphold its volatile nature. So, this is like a slanted perspective of what logic is to come to your own conclusions and to support your conclusions. This is also something that I want to talk about. Leo is very subjective. If a Leo person loves you, they will be very dedicated to you. Aquarius is more broad in its affection. So it's more about what does the group need versus this person. So it is more willing to often be honest in a way that can be hurtful, but it is necessary. And so this is showing us that sometimes our logic becomes very subjective and we create a lot of patterns just to support our our thinking rather than what's actually there. So this is really like politics in in general, right? Like just everyone has their own reason for believing a certain thing and then we're just fighting that thing and it's like people are not budging because to do so would to undermine their entire sense of selfhood. Oh, I could talk about that. I have a past history in political activism and I'm no longer in that world. So I also have a past history of being in the science field. I have a doctorate in pharmacy, but he talks about here only when science is skeptical of its very own nature can it be regarded as truly objective, which science unfortunately is not um truly objective as we think it is oftentimes. This shadow is really just this like relentless pursuit of answering questions and making sure that the logic and the patterns still fit. And the gift here, if you are familiar with me, he actually uses a really cool example of koans here. And I've talked about Buddhist koans before, but essentially they're puzzles that are given to, I believe it's Zen Buddhists, yeah, Zen Buddhist students that are impossible to solve with the mind. And it almost like they are given them to contemplate and meditate upon, and it causes you to like break your mind and have to see with something deeper, something different than the mind. So he uses that as an example. But he says the gift of understanding is the only answer that will satisfy a person's dissatisfaction. And it must come through the exhaustion of your mind rather than any other way. And I think for somebody like myself who had this Mercury Pluto opposition in my chart, I just did a video on the transcendent function where I talk about this. And I had to hold that opposition of the needing to be right for so long until my mind literally broke. And I think that had a lot to do with me moving out of politics because and just everything, like my opinions about life, like I'm not going to sit here and say I never want to be right because my partner would dispute that 100%. But I will say that my need to be right has dissolved greatly, especially as it comes to Aquarian things and Sagittarian things, my beliefs, my convictions about how the world can become a better place. You know, I'm very glad that my mind was broken to some extent before I started creating content because it is a different type of freedom that you have knowing that I don't come on here to try to force anybody into believing what I believe. Like, I genuinely don't. And I can't say that I always felt that way. So, especially when it comes to really big things like politics and how I believe people should be treated or animals, as an ethical vegan, it's like now I come on and it's just like, this is what I think. And if you don't agree, that's totally fine. If you're rude about it or whatever, I'm not going to talk to you. But you get to have your thoughts and opinions. And this is true freedom. This is, in my opinion, true freedom of thought. This is Aquarian ideal. I talked about I have so many videos, you guys. I talked about, the shadow of Pluto and Aquarius previously in a video and how it can become very demanding that you also believe in its logic. It's like that's freedom. That's not freedom of thought. If we want to have the freedom to think what we want to think, we have to grant that to others as well. This is sovereignty, right? Leo has a lot to do with sovereignty. And so, like, I think themes of sovereignty, since we had that Jupiter Saturn conjunction in 2020 in Aquarius, these themes of sovereignty have been coming up again and again. The systems, Aquarius, and in human design, we've got this massive change coming in 2027 where systems are really starting to break down. We're already seeing it, bringing up these themes of like, what is sovereignty? I mean, I'm literally teaching a workshop on safety and sovereign. So this is very, very important to me that we learn how we can discern sovereignty in our bodies, making sovereign decisions outside of the conditioning of the world. And we are so conditioned, guys. Like the internet is just creating a scenario that is truly unprecedented in how much we are being conditioned day to day. We are being asked to rise into that occasion, right? Like we can't just wish that the internet was not the way it is. I mean, we can definitely make our own decisions about how we interact with the online world, but the world is the way that it is. We can't fight that constantly. It's like trying to fight a battle that you're just not going to win. We have to accept the world as it is. It doesn't mean we agree with it, but we have to accept the world as it is and then say, okay, knowing that, accepting that this is what is, what can I offer? How can I find empowerment and sovereignty here still? Okay, one last thing before we go, something that we can take with us as we move into this solar eclipse, trusting that whatever message you needed to hear, uh, you got today. Maybe it's just one thing that you needed to hear. Oh, something fell out. Let me use my toe. Can I use it? Okay. The 7 of Pentacles is often a card of, like, disappointment. I've worked so hard. Why am I not I'm sorry, this is just weird because I literally got this message. I wrote it in my notes app. I wrote it in my notes app. It's not just about working hard. So I'm just laughing that this came up right now. This is us feeling like this might be like a sunk cost fallacy that we might have to release in order to move into this new thing, new way of being, new calling that we're being pulled toward. Meaning, yeah, you might have worked really hard on something and it's just not working out. Or it's not fit for you anymore. And you are resisting something about starting it new, even though you can feel the limitations of what you have created, what you have been doing. You're still feeling this sense of trying to hold on to it because I worked so hard. Or maybe for others of you, it is this feeling of like, I'm working so hard. Why am I not seeing the fruits of my labor? Attaining a goal is not just about working hard because there are so many aspects. I literally wrote this in my notes app. I'm looking at this right now. So maybe I'll do a little follow up because it could be that you're not focusing on things that are actually going to move things along. Right? This is like one of the biggest things that I've thought about or that comes up for me owning a business is I could just do things endlessly. But is it the part of the business that needs working on then? Is this going to actually move something? Right? And so this is like as a business owner and a creative who wants to share their gifts and make money for it, we've got to start thinking about like it's not just about doing more. Ah, as a projector, we are masters of efficiency of energy. We are here to guide energy, say what is the most efficient use of energy in this scenario. So this is something that we're really here to help others with. It can be difficult to help ourselves with sometimes, but this is something that comes up a lot. Is like maybe you're working really hard, but you don't need to be working that hard. you're working too hard on the wrong things. That's a possibility. Or it might be that this thing is just not something that is going to come with you in this next phase of life, and you've got to just accept that you did the work that you did and now it's done. The sunk cost fallacy can keep us in really draining situations for a very, very long time. It can keep us in outdated jobs, outdated patterns, outdated relationships because, but I've put so much in. Yes, but are you willing to continue to put time in and look back and just say, instead of 7 years or 5 years, I put in 10 years, right? And trusting yourself, trusting your heart space right now to tell you, to show you the direction that you're being called in. This is a massive turning point in some way. It's almost like a decision is being made that's going to be putting you on a new path. And so you might not see where that path may lead. You may not know where it's exactly going to be going. And it may just be like a tiny decision, a tiny pivot. But oftentimes, those are the ones that make the most difference in our lives. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you would like to read more about what Safe Scene Sovereign is all about and if it would be a good fit for you, I'll have that link down below, as well as my other offerings. I have Creative Rewilding coming up soon as well. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. I look forward to reading your comments and seeing what you guys have to say about what you're feeling and just everything that we discussed today. There's a lot of material there. So, all right, I'll see you next time.